67 seconds? Count them 1, 2, 3, now. Imagine sitting in a congressional hearing room, cameras rolling, every member watching, reporters in the gallery, and the most powerful law enforcement official in the United States cannot speak for 67 seconds. That happened. But here's what nobody told you about why. Because it wasn't the silence that mattered most. It was what Ted Lieu played before he asked the question. And once you hear what was in that recording, you'll understand why Patel had no answer. We'll get to the recording in a moment. But first, do you know whose name is on the Epstein client list? Keep that question in your mind, because the answer comes later. And when it does, everything you just watched will make sense in a completely different way. Here's where we are. Kash Patel is sitting at the witness table, FBI director, most powerful domestic law enforcement position in the country. He has been answering questions for nearly 2 hours. Smooth, controlled, precise, nothing has touched him. He has navigated every hostile question, every difficult exchange, every attempt to find an opening in his testimony. Nothing has landed. Until Ted Lieu leans forward, reaches for his laptop. Patel sees it. Watch his posture change. Because Lieu isn't pulling up a document, he isn't reading from a file, he's doing something that has never been done before in an open congressional hearing. He's pressing play on an audio recording. 90 seconds, that's all it takes. The room goes completely still. What's on that recording? We'll get there. But first you need to understand something about what Lieu did, because what looks simple on the surface is actually one of the most calculated moves in recent congressional history. Lieu is a former federal prosecutor. He knows exactly how evidence works. He knows that a recording of what was actually said inside the FBI lands harder than any document, harder than any speech, harder than any question, because you can argue with a document, you cannot argue with a voice. And what that voice said, inside the FBI, in an official conversation, about the Epstein client list, is something the American public was never supposed to hear. But here's the part that changes everything. That recording didn't come from a leak. It wasn't obtained illegally. It wasn't from a whistleblower hiding in the shadows. It was formally requested, formally produced, sitting in Lieu's office for weeks before this hearing. Nobody played it, nobody dared, until now. The 93 seconds end. The room is silent. Lieu closes the laptop. He looks directly at Patel. And he asks one question. Just one. What does the FBI intend to do about the Epstein client list? 1, 2, 3. Count with me. 10 seconds pass. 20, 30. Patel opens his mouth, then closes it. 40 seconds. 50. The reporters in the gallery start counting out loud. 60, 61, 62, and then 67 seconds after the question was asked, Patel finally speaks. But before we get to what he says, you need to understand what that silence actually means, because this is the part nobody is talking about. Patel is not confused. He is not stalling. He is not a man who doesn't know what to say. He is a man who knows exactly what he cannot say. Here's why. There are 3 answers available to him in that moment: an honest answer, a politically safe answer, and a legally defensible answer. And in that moment, after that, recording none of those 3 answers are the same answer. An honest answer would require admitting that decisions were made about the client list that cannot be justified, that the FBI he now leads inherited a situation that has no clean exit. A politically safe answer would require deflecting from the recording, offering context, invoking legal complexity, running out the clock without conceding anything. A legally defensible answer would require staying within the precise boundaries of what an FBI director can say publicly about active or closed federal investigative files. 3 answers, 3 different directions, no overlap. And here is what nobody in that room could say out loud, the part that sat in the air, above every camera and every reporter watching. Patel knew all 3 answers. He is not a man who lacks options. He is a man who discovered that every option available to him destroys something he needs to protect. That is why seconds passed in silence. Not weakness. Calculation. The silence of a man who has just realized that every door in the room leads somewhere he cannot go. Now back to the recording, because here is what most coverage of this moment completely missed. What did Lieu play? This is where it gets serious. The recording captured an official conversation inside the federal government. Specific people, specific dates, discussing the Epstein client list, not in the abstract, not in the vague institutional language that government officials use when they know they might be overheard, but directly, plainly, the way people talk when they believe the conversation is internal and the consequences are manageable. And what those voices said on a recording that is now part of the permanent congressional record of the United States made 3 things unmistakably clear. The list exists. It is in federal custody, and the decisions made about what to do with it were not made on the basis of what the law required. Read that last line again. Stop. Read it one more time. Not what the law required, not what justice demanded, not what the victims of Epstein's crimes were promised, repeatedly, by institution after institution, administration after administration, would eventually happen. Something else entirely. Now remember the question we started with. Do you know whose name is on that list? Here's the honest answer. We don't know all of them. That is the entire point. The list is sealed. The names are in federal custody. The people who know what's in it are the same people who have been managing what gets released and what doesn't. But here is what we do know. The Epstein client list is not a rumor. It is not a conspiracy theory assembled from circumstantial evidence. It is a documented reality, acknowledged in federal court filings, referenced in official proceedings, confirmed in testimony by individuals with direct knowledge of the investigation. It contains the names of people Jeffrey Epstein procured minors for, across multiple decades, multiple jurisdictions, multiple countries. Those names are in federal custody, and the people whose names appear on that list have, in many cases, continued to occupy positions of significant power and influence in American public life. That is not speculation. That is the official record. Here's what nobody wants to say out loud. The list has been in federal custody this entire time. Every FBI director who has held that position in the years since Epstein's death has had access to it. Every attorney general, every relevant senior official, inside the Justice Department, they all knew it, existed, they all made decisions about what to do with it, and none of those decisions resulted in the list being released. Here's the question that nobody in that hearing room asked directly. Why? Not why in the political sense, not the version of why that generates talking points in cable news segments and social media arguments. Why? In the evidentiary sense. What is in that list that has made every single institution with the authority to release it choose, administration after administration, not to release it? The recording Lieu played was part of the answer, not all of it, but enough. After a recording is played that documents exactly how those decisions were made, the silence is not nothing. It is the loudest thing in the room, louder than any prepared statement, louder than any press release, louder than anything his communications team will produce in the 48 hours that follow, because a press release can be crafted. 60-7 seconds on camera cannot. Patel eventually speaks, and watch what he does, not what he says. What he does, he invokes investigative sensitivity, legal complexity, the department's ongoing obligations to victims, and to the integrity of the record. He references the challenges involved in managing materials from a federal investigation of this scope and duration. These are not unreasonable things to say in isolation. But here is what he does not say. He does not address the recording, not a single word about what those voices said, not a single explanation for what was documented in the 93 seconds loop, just played into the permanent record of the United States Congress. He speaks for 2 minutes and 30 seconds. He does not once address the recording. Think about that for a moment. 93 seconds of audio, played in open session, entered into the permanent congressional record, describing official decisions about the most significant unreleased document in American law enforcement history, and the FBI director responds for 2 minutes and 30 seconds without mentioning a single word of what was on it. That is not an accident. That is a choice. Lieu notices this. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't bang on the table. He doesn't deliver a speech about the victims or the cover-up or the years of institutional failure. He simply notes quietly, for the record, that the response did not address the content of the recording he had played. That notation is now in the transcript. Permanently. And here is what that means for everyone watching. Anyone who reads that transcript, any journalist, any researcher, any attorney, any future congressional investigator, any person who simply wants to understand what happened in that room, will see the sequence exactly as it occurred. The recording, the question, the 67 seconds, the answer that answered nothing, the notation that the answer answered nothing. All of it, in order, permanently. No press release changes it, no communications strategy softens it, no political cycle buries it. It is there, exactly as it happened, in the permanent archive of the United States House of Representatives. For as long as that archive exists, don't think about what that means for the people whose names are on that list. They have spent years, in some cases, decades, assuming that what was said about them inside federal institutions would stay inside federal institutions, that the gap between what was known privately and what was acknowledged publicly would hold. That gap held across administrations. It held across multiple FBI directors. It held through years of congressional pressure and legal challenges and sustained public demand. It held through documentary investigations and court proceedings and the deaths of individuals who might have provided testimony. It held because the institutions managing it had the tools, the authority, and most importantly, the institutional interest to keep it holding. Until Ted Lieu walked into a hearing room with a laptop and pressed play. The client list is still unreleased. The people whose names are on it are still unidentified. The victims, the real people, the ones this has always been about, are still waiting. Not metaphorically waiting, actually waiting. In real life, some of them have been in court for years fighting to force the release of records that document what was done to them. Some have testified publicly, some have given everything they have to a system that has given them almost nothing back. They are still waiting. They have been waiting for years, but something shifted in that hearing room. Not a dramatic shift, not the kind of shift that produces immediate results or forces immediate action, a permanent one. A recording that was never supposed to be played in public is now part of the permanent congressional record. A silence that was never supposed to be on camera is now on camera, preserved in the archive of a House committee proceeding, available to anyone who wants to find it. And the man who leads the institution that holds the list, holds the recording, and holds every other piece of the federal Epstein record that has not yet reached the public. That man's first answer to the question of what he intends to do about all of it lasted 67 seconds of nothing, followed by 2 minutes and 30 seconds of words that addressed everything except what the recording required him to address. The recording is in the record. The silence is in the record. The answer that never came, that is in the record, too. And the question that started this, do you know whose name is on that list, remains open. It will remain open until someone with the authority to answer it decides that the cost of continued silence is higher than the cost of the truth. 67 seconds told us something about how far away that moment still is. The transcript will reflect all of it, for as long as it exists, which is forever. So, what do you think about that moment, when Ted Lieu played that recording, and Kash Patel sat in silence for 67 seconds? Was that just caution, or did that moment reveal something more? And what do you think matters more, what was said on that recording, or the fact that it wasn't addressed at all? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more breakdowns of the moments where silence says more than words, make sure to like the video and subscribe to Capital Clash so you don't miss what comes next.